Esteemed friends and colleagues, thank you for getting together to this round table. And first of all, I thank those who agreed to make presentations here in the headquarters. We are in the premises which are called the Gallery of Shukin and Morozov, commemorating those two great collectors of art, but the topic is based on the reality of museum life. I'm talking about sacrilege, legal definition of sacrilege, and legal approach to sacrilege in art. It's rather a broad topic, which suddenly became very important. Are we coming back to the old times, to the Middle Ages, to set up a precedent and to start witch hunting when in the 10th century in Cordoba the Christians defiled Muslims, they wanted to be executed, and that resulted in an uprising. There is a very strong political aspect to this. The situation is aggravating. Some believe it's an impact of Islamic culture over Europe. Quite often it is said that Muslims do protect their sacred things, and the Christians do not do enough to do that. But really, there is a tense attention to the sacrilege in Europe. I'm talking about religious values and other values. Germany discusses very seriously a special law on sacrilege. Unfortunately, Professor Mosebom, a philosopher and writer, failed to come. He's one of the active developers of that law on sacrilege. In Germany today, we in Russia are passing laws on sacrilege, and there is a lot of public activity around the world around what is seen as sacrilegious behavior towards certain sacred items. And Brothers Chapman's exhibition in this here building seemed obscene to others, to ones and not to others, and there are other exhibitions all around the world. Tannhäuser staging in Germany was shut down because it brought up reminiscences of the gas chambers and of Nazism, and people got really scandalized. And at the same time, even a compassionate mention of that story is seen in an ambiguous way. We live in a world where everything is interrelated, and what's one of the troubles of our world that people learn about things quite fast. So we have to look for some measures to be taken about what should happen. And there are also cultural issues here. What's a metaphor? Just imagine a cross. Is that people speak, it's my Calvary, they're crucifying me. Is that a metaphor? Is that a sacrilege? Does art have the right for autonomy within this world? There may be different answers to this question. I will remind you that probably the most sacrilegious thing written in the Russian literature is several chapters written by Tolstoy, and that brought up a lot of reaction, and this very much looked like a Muslim describes a Eucharist in a Byzantine temple in the 10th century. There's a lot of examples of intended sacrilege or something that has happened by chance but that may be seen as sacrilege. It is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists, our colleagues who agreed to speak, will use the Davos arrangement. We'll ask them to talk about 10 minutes each about what they think on this issue, and then we'll ask them questions, and then each of them will speak again, and I will ask some questions. I have two questions. No microphone. Insert. Well, putting up a monument to Stalin in Yakutsk, is it a sacrilege? Is Article 58 of the Soviet Criminal Code an act of sacrilege? So it's always very difficult to find a boundary between sacrilege and political correctness. Another matter is the laws that exist. But no microphone. No microphone. There are famous European laws. In the UK, as far as I know, it was a law that prohibited sacrilege towards Church of England. And the law, and Tony Blair thought that they wouldn't pass that law. He left the parliament, and it was his voice that was missing, and the law was not passed. And there are dormant laws in many countries which may always be used. And now the question is, how do we offend no one, and at the same time, how do we talk about sacrilege? Yesterday, there was a first night at the new stage of the Mariinsky. There was obscene language used every 3 minutes. Is that sacrilege? And how does that relate to different laws about public behavior? And the third issue, the sphere of art. Must we build certain fences around it? Certainly, there are certain spheres in art which allow something that is not allowable in public, and that's what civilization is built on. There is a hierarchy of rules. But once again, the information society is common to us all, and maybe those fences and barriers do not work any longer. So, first of all, I would like to pass the floor to Marina Tsigulova, head of the legal department of the State Hermitage Museum. She's the only woman here, so she has the right to be the first one. Ladies first, you know. Marina, you're welcome. And then I would like Father Roman Bogdasarov to speak. He represents the Department on Relationships between Church and Society of the Moscow Patriarchy. Marina, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is first, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to the persons who came to listen to this important topic. And I listened to Mikhail, and I would start answering with the third question posed by Mikhail. My topic is, do we need a special law? Do the rights of culture need a special law on sacrilege? There are several notions here that we must provide a definition. And as a lawyer, and speaking of something to be regulated, we must understand what is to be regulated, and we need to provide definitions first and foremost. And I would like to start with the definitions and the notions that I will be using. And since I will be using such terms as the human rights, cultural rights, sacrilege, art, culture, I first and foremost would like to provide maybe inadequate definitions. The notion of human rights is used by all the civilized countries, and ever since 1945, ever since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is a definition of those rights, and the regulations protecting human rights exist on the national level and on international level. The international law in the area of human rights is a branch of international public law. In order to understand, well, I understand that not everyone is a lawyer in this audience, so I will only enumerate some documents providing for those rights. This is the Universal Declaration of the Human Rights of 1948 and International Pacts on Civil and Human Rights, International Pacts on Cultural Rights, European Convention on the Protection of Human Rights, American Convention on Human Rights, African Charter of Human Rights, Arab Charter of Human Rights, Convention of CIS on the Basic Human Rights and Liberties. So there's a lot of attention paid to regulating human rights, both in international and national laws. However, the cultural rights is something that is less known. It's less widely spread, and the mechanism of its regulation is poorly. It was Dmitry Likhachev who introduced this notion back in 1975. He was the author of the Declaration of Rights of Culture. It was his idea that the modern stage of civilization made it necessary to develop principles and provisions that provide for further development of culture as the heritage of all the humankind. He introduces the notion of humanitarian culture, that is, the culture that is intended to develop creative values, creative traits in humans, and he suggested that rights of culture should be protected just like human rights are protected, and he called for the governments to be the guarantors of keeping the pieces of art for the generations to come. That is the rights of culture. There's a lot of definitions of art. There's an innumerable number of definitions of art. If you Google it up, you will get 1,000 definitions. But I think for the purpose of this meeting, there is a very interesting definition in Encyclopedia Britannica. It writes art is the use of imagination or craft to create something that may be shared with the others. According to this definition, art has a capacity of providing a response in others. And this definition in Encyclopedia Britannica actually matches the definitions of human rights, because certainly human rights do inspire a response in others. And the liberty of speech may be embodied in pieces of art. And Dmitry Likhachev called for the rights of these pieces of art to exist for the generations to come. And certainly these rights may come into conflict with the rights of others, of other persons. Otherwise, your liberty to brandish your fists is limited by the distance to your neighbor's face. And thus, through definitions, let us come up to the definition of sacrilege and the law on sacrilege. I will start with the law on sacrilege that existed and that does exist, because, strange as it may seem, The Russian law or other laws do not provide a legal definition of sacrilege. It is present in the dictionaries, but it's not embodied in the law. However, there were some traditional societies that did not provide a punishment. The Roman law did not provide punishment for sacrilege. The Romans believed that offending the gods is the matter with the gods. The gods, Romans thought, were powerful enough to punish the man themselves. And people are so weak that they needed a law to regulate relationships between them. From the standpoint of Romans, immortal gods did not need any defense from people. In ancient Israel, well, there's again a blasphemy. They spoke of blasphemy, and blasphemy was punished by death, by casting stones. It is well known that Jesus was actually sentenced to death for blasphemy. As for the current times, most developed countries do not have the term sacrilege in their codes of law. There's a violation of instigation law, instigation rational enmity, and instigation of national enmity, and so on and so forth. But in some European countries, sacrilege is a crime. In Norway, Finland, Spain, Portugal, New Zealand. In the Article 166 of the German criminal code has sacrilege, and probably the only definition of sacrilege can be found in German law. And the person who publicly offends the essence of religious convictions of other persons, organizations, or churches may be sentenced to 3 years in prison. In 1996, a person, in 2006, Manfred van X was sentenced to 5 years. It was a suspended sentence. A person who printed toilet paper with an inscription, Holy Quran. The government of Iran sent an official note to the government of Germany, and Manfred was sentenced. In Anglo-Saxon tradition, blasphemy is seen in the civil code. A person may demand that the moral losses and moral damages be remunerated. In the US, the laws on sacrilege remain in Maryland and Massachusetts, but those articles are dormant. In 1952, when a person was accused of sacrilege in New York, the Supreme Court reminded Americans of the 14th Amendment of American Constitution and said it was not a government business. The sacrilege is a crime in most of Islamic countries, in Pakistan, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and the ultimate punishment is capital punishment. And Sudan and Yemen, 50 strokes with a whip. The law of these countries are based on Sharia, and this sacrilege is seen as an offense of Islam. The experience of Russian law, which we use extremism as a secular analogy of sacrilege. So this experience shows that our formulation, our language, the language in our law, is a very easy way to oppress and persecute any persons. And Brightly Chapman's is a good example of that. They organized an exhibition called The Horrors of War, and the State Hermitage participated in that. So they were accused of extremism by the so-called Orthodox Cossacks, and the prosecutor's office did accept the Cossacks' claim, but finally they found out the exhibition was not extremist. But coming to the definition, the legal definition of sacrilege was provided for the last time in 1885, and it was defined as the offense and mocking the rights. And one of the acts of sacrilege was using a a candle made of fat of lard rather than made of wax. And other definitions are provided in the Russian dictionaries, can be applicable next to everything. It is called, for instance, public mocking the memory of great heroes, memories of great books, and so on and so forth. So it involves everything. And the second item in encyclopedia shows that in the Tsarist Russia, that sacrilege as well as blasphemy was one of the crimes against religion. I would ask you a provocative question, if you allow me. There is Yakov Krotov, who has a website, and he writes, for instance, he provides his own definition. A sacrilege, or rather the right of sacrilege, is the ordinary right of the liberty of speech made from a point of view of an archaic person. From his standpoint, Ivan the Terrible could describe the democracy in such a way, and that would be sacrilege. Out of my analysis, I like a definition of sacrilege. A sacrilege is an intended offense of something that is dear to many and that is recognized by the society as a cultural or historical heritage. Of course, this definition is absolutely subjective in its nature, but from my point of view, intended is the key word here. To offend, there must be an intent. And if you look at an administrative if you look at a crime, for instance, there must be an intention, and it's very difficult to establish an intention in this case of sacrilege, because you cannot look into the person's mind. So you should judge about the sacrilege by whether it's dangerous for the society and for the people, and probably that would be the right criterion. Well, it's a very theoretical part, and now I would like to provide a quick illustration of the intended,
which allow you to see how, when art can be considered as sacrilege. In 2003, the Orthodox smashed the exhibition "Be Careful, Religion" the Sakharov Center. The people came with pain to the exhibition for the first time. They had not seen the exhibition, but they came with the purpose to punish the organizers of the exhibition, what they actually did. And what was most interesting is their act was qualified as a hooliganism. A criminal case was established, which was stopped for the lack of the crime. But the organizers of the exhibition were accused of instigating religious hatred. In 2003, the BBC decided not to show serial Pop Town, where using the the typical black UK humor. They showed the life of the Catholic priests, even with the Pope. And at the same time, no mention of the Catholic religion was shown, but it was obvious from the animated movie that it was intended to show Catholic priests. And the Catholic priests of the UK protested against that, and the Bishop of Munich demanded that a criminal case would be established against the creators of the animation movie. On the other hand, I can cite another example. there was a very interesting case when 1964 in the United States there occurred a unique legal proceeding. The state Ohio against the movie, and Jana Moreau was featuring in that movie, and the legal case ended in a draw, while the court, because the judge says I cannot make a decision until I see this movie, but I don't have enough time to waste on looking at such movie. And in another case, Rodionov conceded to the request of the demand of the Orthodox priest by removing the one particular painting from the exhibition, while the it was presented as an icon in 1989, and Kosolapov was the guy, the painter was able. But nevertheless, Dmitry Smirnov provided to the director of the Tretyakov Gallery a collective letter to this, saying that this particular painting instigates religious hatred. Another example, caricatures. Everyone remembers about them, but very few people remember how this caricature scandal occurred. The instigation, the subject matter was that the reason was that in Karl Niebruch in Germany, the professor Jew read a lecture on the history of world religion. By way of example, he cited, citations from a variety of religious books, and he took Quran in his hand, and after the lecture he was beaten by a group of Muslims, thinking that it was not possible for a Jew to hold a Quran. And then Swedish author wrote a book about Quran and found that Swedish painters were afraid of drawing pictures for illustrations for this book, and they only 12 and they made these illustrations, but finally they were considered as caricatures by the society. And the Danish paper later on published a caricature depicting the Mohammed with a bomb in a Chalma. And then the French paper placed on the front page a caricature with Buddha, Yahweh, and Jesus Christ addressing the Mohammed, saying that be at peace. Everyone has been caricatured and presented in a very funny way. So it was actually a series of caricatures. In 2006, the Vatican published a statement by which it denounced the publication of caricature and aggressive reaction of the believers. So obviously, the principle of non-offending other religions is a universal. Then, in 2006, the Danish court acquitted Danish journalists who published an article relating to Mohammed. And then there was another case when some pictures were shown on an exhibition in Danish in Denmark, and in each all of the paintings were covered with some kind of a cover. There was a hole, and each person could come and peep through the hole. And then a criminal case was I request you to stand to the timetable. May I cite two last examples. When in December 2012, the Procurator Office of the St. Petersburg Court accepted proposals from the people who had never seen the exhibition of Chapmans, and they claimed that this exhibition offended their religious things, and the petitioners were indignated with the pro-fascist exhibition. It was addressing the audience who was acquainted with the historical factors. The Procurator Office failed to find those the petitioners. And the last exhibition is the exhibitions of antique art in Doha. The exhibition of antique Doha in the capital of Qatar was Olympia Myth Games and was dedicated to Olympic Games. And when the Minister of Culture of Greece came to participate in the opening, he saw that all the statues had were covered with a black cloth covering the genitals, and either they would be open as they were when they were created, or they would be sent back to Greece. And they were sent back to Greece. And no exhibition actually occurred, despite the fact that prior to that they were successfully displayed in Berlin. So, in real fact, to complete this list of examples, I would like to end up with a provocative statement and the site of Alexander Sotos that the feelings of the believers should be protected from any insults. So we should very attentively look at that. And we shouldn't say that believers are, say, special people. They go here and there seeking for a chance to be insulted. They look at the forward and afterwards they go to exhibitions and seeking a chance to be insulted. They have the right for such hysterics, and we should protect their feelings. Well, you have abused the time. Whether we need the law for the special right of culture to protect. International law, in its numerous recommendations, says that no special law about sacrilege should not be there. There should not be a special law on blasphemy. Our Ministry of Justice came up with this suggestion, definition that the Russian law has enough, say, laws to prosecute those who violate or insult the feelings of the believers, and one should follow the recommendations, follow the existing laws, and see where such sacrilege becomes an intended one, becomes in the public, and really takes the form of an public insult. And summing up, I would like to say that to conquer the event, thing which is known as sacrilege, we should take away the take from the paradigm of the free believers. We stand for the preservation of our cultural heritage and for preserving respect for rights of each other. Well, here, in this case, we'll have to find this common definition base which can unite atheists, believers, Buddhists, and representatives of other religions, and then we won't have to fight enemies, but we'll also be seeking allies for our actions. Thank you. Well, we have good examples. Well, in Kazan, we opened a big exhibition related to Olympic Games. There was one hall showing the exhibitions of the Olympic winners. They have all the genitals, and no one was offended. But I can tell that here we can do that. But in St. Petersburg, it was, say, adopted as a propaganda of homosexualism. So you see how different things can be treated in different Russian cities. Actes Roman Bogdasarov, deputy chairman of the synodal department for the responsible for relations between the church and the society. It's my pleasure to be with you today, and I was very pleased to hear the previous presentation. But one should not be at a haste to say everything at the first toast. Leave something to others who would be speaking after you. And well, it appears that our first speaker has told everything, told us everything. Even she mentioned Nevzorov. So, indeed, the subject matter is a really engaging one and interesting one. There is a tale. Yesterday we heard the name of the story of the prodigal son. There is a tale about the Samaritan, the one sometimes you find among other peoples who belong to a variety of social strata, a person who is a foreigner to all, but he happens a good Samaritan who came to rescue others, to help those who are in need. So the role of the art, of the science, to help the society to become better, not to take it back to the cave age, not to make the life conducive to the basic instincts of a person, not to convert the person back into an ape or whatever animal, but to elevate a person, to help him or her to understand what is his way of life, to become the man with a capital letter. We, Orthodox Christians, very can easily understand that, because Christ for us is the person is the model we should make our life after. But the art can lead persons not only to God, but it may lead to spiritual reformation. But on the other hand, art may result in situation when a person may be going the Satan's way. We see a lot of examples when the young generations is deceived by the pseudo actions of arts. I am also responsible for the council of the faith, and we discuss many cases of deceits in the sphere of religion. And when, say, young people are told that this is the only religious leader who has the ultimate truth, ultimate wisdom, and then such statements provoke among young people and some other say, groups of the population violence. The same may happen in the art. We may transgress the border, the line, where we should invoke a chain reaction society, where all barriers will be smashed, and the criteria would be not the spiritual richness of a person who takes from that richness something to share with others, but on the other hand, the misery of a person, when he proposes others to look at his misery and to say, I am no in any way worse than you are. So this spiritual impotence, which may be termed as sacrilege, or may be termed with any other name, may become a norm, and many people would say, well, that's fun, that's interesting, this is trendy for us, this is voguing. Well, it's a sad phenomenon if such thing occurs, and will continue. We try to recall a very interesting painting. Hans Jr. Painted a painting, Dead Christ in a Tomb, and Dostoevsky said from that having seen this picture, some people may lose their faith. So you can understand what strong energy was emanating from that painting, which could say make people to lose a person to lose his faith in a God. So art may be a very powerful, say, tool. It is a Christianity with a negative sign, if you say, but because we always speak about resurrected Christ and not dead Christ, as is the case in this painting. So we can see that art may provoke a person to start thinking, or to start to believe, or not to believe, but at any rate, the art should and is able to move a person to a spiritual quest. We're speaking about modern things which happen. I don't want to give definitions now or to assess what is happening these days on many occasions, but quite often we see such examples which distract the foundation of the state. If we say that traditionally religious, in the course of the centuries, help our country, European nations, to become those powerful states in the area of science, in this area of culture, in medicine, and many other areas of human effort. And when somebody comes, disrupts or undermines those fundamentals, starts to ridicule the foundations of the faith, that means that in this way, the very foundations of the state are disrupted, are undermined, and this government, the state, cannot be, say, looking at such events without concerns. Certain frameworks, certain limitations should be placed. I'm trying to understand the logics of the state. Well, I do not want, of course, to abuse to rights of the state. I'm simply trying to fantasize a little bit. Of course, I'm speaking on behalf of the church. So let me get back. Speaking about the role of the church, I would want to convey the following idea to you. The church, it does not impose any limitations or bans. The church is not trying to say, no, you should not, never, never. But the church wants to, or tries to um, imbue into the minds of the people the assessment of what is good and what is bad, what is evil, what is good. If you go the evil way, you will be if you negate the God, then you will have to bear the fruit. While if you praise the God, if you go the God's way, you'll get the salvation. Indeed, why you should be offended, say, complain to God if something happens in your life, if you negated God at the very inception of your life. This is a very capital sin, and many people, having come to this border, do not know what to do. So, speaking about the legal aspects of the sacrilege in art, I would rather go as far as to say that it is necessary indeed for a modern society to understand, to figure out, to sort out in definitions. There is an opinion, one school of thought. There is another school of thought. There is one expert opinion, another expert. But the law should be should be universally applied to all. And yesterday, at the plenary session of the forum, many prominent speakers would mention that if the law is one for all, should we not, in the sphere which bothers, which touches the most sacred things for everyone, say sacred symbols, I don't know, well, what should we do? Do we need to impose penalty on someone? In case we should go a different way. We should develop a common position, a common platform. It may be, let a person understand that if he commits an act of sacrilege, act of, say, a violation of symbols which are sacred for others, he will be punished. In what way? That's a different pair of shoes. May I give the floor now to Farida Sadulin, who is a co-chairman of information. He is a leading scientific worker at the Institute of Oriental Studies. I think the Hermitage Museum is the place where it's a huge museum. It's a great museum, of course, encyclopedic museum, a world-class museum, but in my mind it allows to overcome this dichotomy which exists, like ours and alien. I have been watching the activities of Hermitage for many times, and together with Michael Piotrowski, we worked together. We studied together. We both Arab experts, and the great work which is intends to show the achievements of the Christian culture. I think this is the main highway which all, say, members of our society, be they believers or not, be they Christians or Muslims, should go through, irrespective of their affiliations. I am an Arabist by my professional affiliation, and on many things I look with a different angle. From a different angle. Some of the European Oriental scholars said that Islam is a religion of very clear-cut definitions. I thought about that while I was sitting listening to your presentation. In what way Sharia, as the Muslim law, say, formulates the issue of addresses the issue of sacrilege? You know, in the Islamic conscience, Islamic mind, there is only one paradigm imbued from the birth. If you translate it into Russian language, it will sound as though he who addresses the law in respect of you should be responded adequately. So that means any external aggression is justified in being responded in the same way, but not more. Any, say, act of hooliganism should be stopped and should not be facilitated or tolerated. In this case, you may turn into it may end up very bad in a bad way. So when we speak about the unity of monotheistic religions, one should understand the following: one thing, if the Christian tradition, the religion of love, if you say hit on one cheek, you should make available the other cheek, and there is certain great wisdom of the Christianity teaching, but in Islam, which is the religion of justice, any aggression should be stopped. This is their premises. And when we say that if there are certain set cases when of rude behavior towards Islamic spiritual values, when certain, say, parades stage against Muhammad, the prophet, when caricatures are published about which Marina approach, one should understand one very simple thing. Yes, there are European values. There is a human declaration of human rights, but there are laws which are more ancient in their history, and they can be modernized, maybe. And the Muslim society community has been working on that very intensively. There are a number of forms of appellations, of punishment, of any, say, demeanor in the Muslim society. There are two stratas in the Islamic society: Hassa, which the elite of the society, educated people who, in principle, can use modern mechanisms which are available by the legal science, by international. But there are another strata of the society, Amma, the Muslim street, so to speak, and many scientists who work in Al-Azhar think that, believe that this is indeed the immediate reaction of the people is the pure response of the faith, because these people do not know the laws of political correctness, and if some of their traditional beliefs are violated, the world outlook is violated, they believe they're justified in responding in an adequate way, in a public way, showing their say, displeasure with that. Mikhail Piotrovsky, making the introductory remarks, mentioned in particular that if we look at Spain, if you look at the European continent, then we will find that this is, we believe that this is the cradle birth of the Christian faith. But for 7 centuries, Spain was governed by Arabs, and when they travel in Spain, when you look around, you can find, coming to Catholic say, temples, you see the ornament which is Muslim and Arabian. And when, say, when the guide said to the Palace of Alcazar is our national heritage, one should understand that they were built by Arabs. And for Arab scientists, Arab scholars, it's very clear. And I believe that there is a lot of work to do. And from the legal standpoint, for the legal society, for the religious community, but at any rate, we should keep always remembering that the values which belong to monotheistic religions are not subject to transformation. This is something which people have lived with for centuries. They live with it now, and I would like to hope that they will continue to live with that. There should be a dialogue, cross-religious dialogue. There should be an exchange of opinions, and our roundtable perhaps may contribute to this purpose. May I now give the floor to Mr. Ivlev, who is the Deputy Minister of Culture for the Russian Federation. Indeed. What is the most important is to concentrate on what problems does sacrilege in art create. There are issues There are problems. There are indeed problems. I would not want to now spend time speaking about the definitions, but from the lawmaking process, the most important thing is to find the methods, the tools to address the problem. However, to find a definition, to make a definition relating to public relations, which has a great deal of, say, ethical component, is difficult. For us, we understand that sacrilege is an very aggressive intrusion into a historical and traditional spiritual, say, world. The very existence of the art, which introduces us into the contentious field and forces us to use the term sacrilege, is the absence of any bans and free-for-all situation when the culture of freedom so is proclaimed to be absolute. And not only they speak about the creative freedom, but actually the provocative nature of the freedom. And a painter who works in this genre transgresses the borders, but purposefully trying to find his way to offend others. So we believe that a painter can cross the border, but then sacrilege may appear not, say, as a result of, say, ill intention, but it may be a result of say, positive erring. So I believe that it's too early to introduce specific laws on this issue, but it's clear for us that when we see one moment deformation the principles of the artful culture, and in the future it may be presented differently, this is a trend of the development. This is a vector of the development, and with every passing year in various manifestations, such things happen in more often and more often. Mr. Florensky used to say that the society, culture, non-religious culture appeared as a result, emerged as a result of separation from the cultural code. But now in this country, we have several generations of people who despised religious faith, and thus atheistic concept, which was the rule of the day in this country, was based on the sacrilege, say, towards Orthodox person. And this sacrilege was a part and parcel of the many years, decades of our life in the Soviet Union. So to change this overnight, to change it, and to say that sacrilege has a certain degree of errors which are may be accepted by the society, is a wrongful way to go.
I absolutely share my colleague's opinion that we must weigh the risks involved in various artistic expressions. However, we believe that a reaction, a response of the society to those risks must be manageable and managed by the ministries and the public agencies. We should avoid being emotional or to hyperbolize about these issues. After all, these are issues of creative activities that are not subject to any control or avoid easy measures of management. Every single response must be individual and professional. And the response, it must be creative rather than legalistic. I do not believe that every single piece of art carries an enormous charge of sacrilege, of blasphemy. It is the entirety of philosophy that lies behind the creation of a series of pieces of art that is dangerous. I believe that our national reaction to attempts at blasphemy and sacrilege is pretty strong and robust. Law enforcement in the field of arts is a very tricky issue. It is very difficult to define an art or its sphere. A good practical example is the transfer of art across borders. Customs officers are always at the difficulty to classify a piece of something as a piece of art. However, we must arrive at a definition to apply any legal practice to it. Yes, so we do have expertise, we have analytical opinions, we have whatever. If a piece of work is intended for public display, it must be considered as a piece of art, as a piece of creative expression. This is a very generic definition of a piece of art. But what about so many other things like archaeological artifacts? We don't know how to treat those things. What is an antique? Is it subject to commercial relations, to sales and purchases? Or should it be a piece to be kept in a museum? So, my message is clear. Unless and until we define a piece of art, our discussions about sacrilege and profanation of religion in art will be at best difficult and futile. So far, we must set an objective not to step over a red line, not to infringe on the freedom of expression. Mikhail Yefimovich Shvitko, Special Representative of the Russian President on issues of cultural cooperation, Minister of Culture for several years, and Director of Moscow Theater. Director, can you hear me? Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Mikhail Borisovich. The most difficult thing in any legislative work is terms and definitions. I'm not a legal professional, but I can feel the importance of this issue. It is easy to use words. It is easy to speak about profanation, blasphemy, and sacrilege. But wait a minute, we cannot define pornography, let alone art. Practical law enforcement is far from having a consensus on what a piece of art is. It is a much more difficult thing to do than to fight sacrilege. In accordance to the opinion of our Ministry of Culture, Russian law has enough articles to regulate any such concept, any such activities. I would like to dwell on issues that would bring across my message that we're dealing with a very delicate issue. Every culture begins with limits. Every religion begins with limits by drawing lines. The culture starts with limits and taboos. It implies limitations of every sort. I like a line of Freud when he said, when a man answered with a when a man first answered with a word to an act of aggression, that was the first step or act of a civilization. In a way, this is a limit, the first limit that has been set by man. So, again, back to my point, every piece of art is basically, originally, a profanation. It is a profanation of the supreme forces, of nature, of whatever. A very simple idea. There used to live a great British writer, author, Eliot. A great thinker, storyteller. He started his artistic career as a poet, writing pieces of verse that were profane in their essence, that were aimed against the Catholic Church. One of his first pieces was Murder in the Cathedral, a story of Henry II killing a bishop. That was a masterpiece, combining ancient tradition with modernistic, poetic nerve. But that was a piece of sacrilege, profanation. Now, the first thing I'm telling my students in the university, you must understand that this is a piece to play. This is not a piece produced by a sect, by an evangelical movement. This is a game which involves profanation. This is done outside the cathedral, outside a sacred place. It is an imitation. This is non-life. It's unreal. Not all of them are well and alive. None of them is dead or buried in a graveyard. This is very, very trivial thing to understand. What about Tolstoy? Tolstoy was through and through a profane. He was profanating Christianity, Christian God, Christian tradition. What about Dostoevsky? This is all a profane vision of illiterate persons of issues basically relating to the Holy Script. In earlier times, they would be impaled for half of what they've said. But this is part of being artistic. You are a creator. You are challenging the creator above. Where it starts and where it begins is a question without an answer. What do we expect from a piece of art? We expect the unexpected. We expect to hear the voice of God, to see His expression, to read His message. But an artist is not a cleric. An artist, once he embarks on his artistic career, he takes a really responsible and, in a way, risky step. I'm not talking about those stupid kids that take off their clothes wherever they want. I'm talking about serious people that are seriously engaged in creating pieces of art appealing to the heavens, appealing to the Creator. Now look, even masters of Renaissance, they appeal to God, to religious subjects. Famous icon writer Ushakov, he also made a crucial step of blasphemy. He had to break off with the canons of iconography. Yes, there are acts of hooliganism, public contempt. Defamation, desecration of holy places, symbolic places, memorials to dead soldiers. There's a unanimous consensus throughout the society. Put them behind bars. Why this consensus? Because our historical memory is a consolidating basis for all of us. We owe our existence to this common shared memory. What this means that a society is made up of different individuals that are confessionally sensitive, that are confessionally hostile, and so many other shades of gray. I quoted that the memory of war is something that is integral to the majority of society, to Christians and Muslims alike. However, there are always freaks around us. But this is not artistic expression. I believe we are passing through a very difficult transition point in the development of our human society. In the context of human rights, we are experiencing a systemic crisis, a point in its development when a good thing turns into its own opposition. Even democracy is in crisis. Non-democratic, undemocratic parties, parties that shy democracy, come to power or may come to power through democratic process. Anti-Christian, anti-humane forces and individuals may come to power or make their interests be known through democratic tradition. Speaking about Islam and Christianity, it is one religious entity in a way, because they have the same roots. They have the same Abrahamic tradition. I believe the answer, the important answer, lies not in whether we have a law or we don't, whether the law is good or not so good. We have to make a crucial decision whether we like it or we don't, whether we cherish our values or we let them loose, whether we stand fast on what we value and what unites us, or we let that foundation cripple away. Take the Russian nation, for example. Russian culture developed on a secular track. Right now, we have another example of a huge cultural rising on a clerical track. There's another trend rising on the profanation track. All those tracks are intertwined. They fight each other, mingle, creating confusion in the minds of man, compounded with a deluge of information, where people who have never know the word welfare can see how people live in New York. Mark Twain was right when he said everybody is free to have or to voice an opinion, but others are free to bloody one's nose for having said that opinion. But that's a case on one on one. Right now, it's a crowd against crowd. It's civilization against civilization, a nation against nation. I'm not a religious person, but I am prepared to respect the rights of others, including the right for to believe in God. Thank you. Tolstoy and naked girls. How can you align those things under the blasphemy umbrella? Now, we are really worried about not artistic expression. We are worried about false or pretentious artistic expression, an expression of public contempt, public arrogance. When it's in the bounds of arts, it's not blasphemy. When it's outside artistic expression, then probably this is simply public contempt, posing off as artistic expression. How do you reckon all those things? Well, thank you for your question. No, I didn't equal Tolstoy to those naked young ladies. The real problem is in artistic analysis. There's a lack of critics and analysts of art that have guts enough to say this is not art, this is trash. I travel a lot through the artistic landscape in Moscow, and I know what I'm saying. I myself didn't have the guts to say to some of people posing of artists that your art is trash. Alexander Karelov, lawyer. I have been practicing countering extremism for a long time. Now, my question is to the audience. What is your opinion on the devaluation of arts as a human activity, as a human endeavor, in the face of general devaluation of values? My attitude is negative. I believe that modern life, modern human environment is very enabling for human degradation. It encourages human fall. That concerns every piece of human activity, including arts. We have to reach out to humans. We have to re-educate them to value what they have: life, love, arts. We cannot just lecture people. We have to reach out, including through high art. Art must be constructive, not degrading. Art must not promote devaluation of values. Natalia Shatikhina, University, Petersburg University, Legal Department, Criminal Public Policy. This is about what may be accepted and what may not be accepted. And my question or comment is addressed to the representative of confessions. Now, you've been saying that the most difficult thing is to give definition. You're wrong. The most difficult thing is to make a choice whether to make it a field of legal action or to keep that sphere outside of legal purview. Law is not the only regulator of human relations. Moreover, it is a very rude instrument. It is a huge hammer that should be used sparingly. Traditionally, religious communities had their own fine instruments of regulating relations. Hence, the difficulties that you're talking about. First, you talk about morality, and only then you try to regulate them with law. But law is a bad instrument. If someone made an act of defamation, should that be treated as a criminal offense or not? Actually, this is not important. This is insignificant. The significant fact is that there is a community, large and small, of people that is out there carrying out those acts. There's a huge community of people that are completely lacking opportunities to visit a museum. They've never been to Petersburg. They can never be touched by acts of defamation or sacrilege, and this is an empty sound. I fail to understand why everybody is appealing to the power of government to take care and to penalize the perpetrators. But who else can we appeal to? One thing is to think about protest, another thing is to act upon your protest. That is a huge difference, and every lawyer will bring this point across to you very vividly. Making a public policy and a public statement about arts is very difficult. One thing is to import a truck. You cannot treat it as scrap metal. You are assumed to use the vehicle as a means of earning livelihood. The same applies to art. What's your opinion about artistic expression as an assumed way of communication? May I try to provide an answer? I'm a believer, I'm an Orthodox faithful, and every faithful person, every believer may appeal to the state to protect his rights, to protect his feelings. As simple as that. Every citizen is entitled to appeal to the state for protection. Mikhail Borisovich was within legal bounds when he brought the case to court. But then there's another aspect. There's no mic. The fact that a religious community appeals to the state means simply that there's a law that allows it to do that. If there is an active legislation protecting against acts of extremism, why shouldn't people use that legal act to protect their interests, to combat extremism? This is a human right. It's as simple as that. And it's a high duty of the authorities to act upon those complaints. The interpreter cannot follow that discussion. Muslim communities, of course, have strong internal regulation that is subject to national laws, of course. There's another thing that is practical law enforcement, and that it is there that questions arise. But in any case, this is a practical issue that is subject to practical reaction of the authorities. Now, if a member of our community commits a wrongful act, we may treat it within our community. We will not need intervention from the state. However, if he is committed a criminal act that is subject to federal legislation, then that's what we do.
Well, we don't come across things like that in Moscow. If you talk about wearing that kerchief or hijab, I believe the problem was acute in the 90s, but now Muslim ladies easily wear that in Moscow. Then I don't understand the subject of the question. I apologize for being maybe slightly incoherent. The question is, there is a piece of art, an act of art. I didn't go to Chapman's exhibition. I didn't want to go. I don't feel offended. I will go to see the Masons, but I didn't go to see Chapman's brothers. But why, in a situation when there is an act of art that you believe offends religious feelings, why does the religious community seeks state assistance rather than uses the power of their word? There's a book about the Pope of Rome. The Pope condemned it, but the true Catholics don't just read it. So it has been blasphemed, and true Catholics don't just read it. Why do you always seek state support and try to get the status of an entity that is next to state agency or state authority? Well, on my part, I would like to say that I do not agree with that. Religious organizations seek state support in every case. Practice shows, and you can make sure of that yourself, that the church always announces that wherever there is an act of culture, of art, as you call it, there is always a reaction by the church. But then, as Mr. Karelov said, then we have the right to appeal to appropriate authorities to get some explanations or to ask them for actions. But we always provide our assessment of what is happening and our opinion of what is happening. There are special research centers, and they involve secular and church experts who help the government, who do not seek support from the government, but they help the government and the society to apply the law. I would provide the following example. There is a center called Orthodox Encyclopedia, and jointly with the New School of Economics, they issued a very interesting comment to the law of liberty of conscience, which shows the practice of law enforcement concerning certain articles of that law and concerning how we should live abiding by the law of this country. And such examples only prove that we interact with the government for the benefit of the society. We do not strive to become an institution within the government or to be protected by the government. Nothing like that. Thank you. I want to comment on what Natalia said and what my colleague said, and about the Chapman's exhibition. I believe there's a significant detail here. The people who believe they are Orthodox or Christians or Muslims, they will not write an application to the prosecutor's office. And I believe that the wrong interpretation of the law of sacrilege allows certain persons to write complaints on this Hermitage, for instance, because those Orthodox Cossacks are not Orthodox and not Cossacks. It was a provocation. Their website contained a petition which was signed by people from regions where people do not know where the Hermitage is, and they would explain that this was a provocation. And I believe that a church-going person will not write complaints to the prosecutor's office. But the incorrect or widely interpreted law on sacrilege allows certain persons to defend their own or pursue their own interests. I do not quite understand. Suppose there is an act of sacrilege, defilation of Muslim values, and the members of the Islamic community decide, why should I write a complaint? Why should I write a complaint? I was offended personally, and it's my personal matter, a vendetta. So I will go to that person myself. Well, you see, we are talking about the law that must be for everyone. And I'm trying to start with the zero level. It's very simple. A person perceives this act of vandalism as an offense, and the reaction of a believer, a simple believer, he is not a member of the Christian or Islamic hierarchy, and he says, why do I need the government, which cannot provide a definition of what is sacrilege and what is not? And the processes start. I have another question, and may I come out? First of all, about what Marina said about the believers and non-believers. I can say that I've been christened long ago. I'm not very pious, but when that story with Pussy Riot happened, personally, I thought that was a shame that actually those girls should have been sent to public work for 500 hours, but I was not offended because my religious feeling is too deep to be offended by those ladies. And let's talk earnestly. We are being pulled into a kind of discussion, into an enmity with religion. What is happening? We have a constitution, we have a secular, Nika Strizak, Fifth Channel, open studio show. So you are getting afraid of criticizing the church. You are afraid of saying you are not a believer because everyone will be on you. Why? We're trying to find out what a secular state is here. It's easier to discuss pornography than secular state. Well, Let us talk earnestly. I believe that this Christian community is provoked by the church, and I was really surprised by Father Roman, who said that we don't have anything to do with that. Someone is not being quite fair or quite earnest. You don't just need the law. You need a law that is convenient for you. You want a piece of art look like a composition of a 5th grader who thinks about whether the teacher will like it or not. And it's very it's a very dangerous thing if we talk about culture, but the faith does not belong to you. The images of Christ and Mary Magdalene, every person has the right to communicate and to think whatever they want. They may kneel down, but they may condemn the God if there is a tragedy. And you don't have the right to tell him he's not doing right. I will speak because these are very serious things. There are certain things that must not be done. You must not break into temples and dance there. You cannot chop icons. You cannot defile crosses. But you also cannot have liturgy in the hermitage. And it is prohibited by law to kiss icons in the Russian museum, but people do that. But I have another question. I want you, well, even before you supply your proposals for the draft law, you've set a threshold. You believe that the subjects of sacrilege may be the images, the name of Christ, the church. Where does that list end? Because I remember a good story when Count Benkendorf got a complaint about Pushkin's line, who wrote about a flock of crows on the crosses. He said, that is none of my business. There are too many people like that in Russia. The number of reasonable people is next to zero, and I can appeal to you or to the Christian community. And when you get offended with Pushkin's not very reverent attention to priests, or why are you not offended by him writing ugly things about the Russian nation? I believe that our intention is to make the state better, to make the nation better. So if we paint a drunken deacon, if we paint a priest who eats meat during the Lent, if we're discussing Lexus cars belonging, if we are discussing, so, and you will never reprimand us for that, because when I reprimand an official, I reprimand the state, but when I reprimand a priest for a good reason, then somehow I'm committing an act of sacrilege. I'm not happy with that. Can you promise me there will be a division like that done? Father Roman will answer her, but I would like to say an important thing. You're being very We have many things apart from the church, and one of the greatest agents provocateurs is the television, and we must think about the consequences. One of the famous events in our history, the Soviet government decided that we must divide the museums, and they took pieces of art from some of the museums, and they said that there is no limit to that. The next step was selling national masterpieces abroad, and that was a logical step that ensued from the first one. So we think that the law can solve every problem, but that does not always happen. You cannot always use the law, and it's our own habit of using some language, some legal language. We have a very low level of culture as such, because for everything there is a rule. There are certain things that must not be done because they must not. And there are no laws and no regulations concerning these things. That is the level of culture in the society that is defined together by religious organizations, by the cultural institutions, by education, and by the state officials. I apologize. Thank you very much. Actually, it's a very interesting question. A very good question, but really I would like to emphasize that we, as representatives of the Church, would be glad to start discussing. We have something to say, but unfortunately, certain platforms for dialogue are still closed for us. Because people say, why do we invite priests for there? They put their fingers in every pie. And as a result, we do not always have an opportunity to express our opinions. You mentioned some of the priests that do not follow a very saintly rules of life. But if you remember the revolutions and the beginning of the 20th century, which resulted in a lot of examples of a real faith when priests who had large families, wife, children, nevertheless chose faith. Between faith and execution, don't try to elude. I will answer the question, and we still have a little time, if you allow me. So really, I agree with you that we must look at different examples of the priest's life, and we do have something to say. And I wanted to answer my colleague Dmitry Davidov, who is the head, but you did not answer my question. I don't want to start an investigation. Father Roman, there is a phrase that you wouldn't like, but it's a good one, if you think about it. When people get offended, the chambermaids are offended. Don't be offended with everything. Unfortunately, you are offended with everything. You start talking about revolution, but let's criticize both bad journalists and bad priests. I'm in favor. One question. Can I finish? That was a comment. Thank you. You know, I'm somehow tired of your religious disputes. I want to introduce myself. I'm Professor Galenskaya, Faculty of Law, St. Petersburg University. We are having a legal forum here. Therefore, I believed that we will be all discussing the problems of what sacrilege is, whether that sacrilege needs to be defined in the law, what is admissible, what is not, when do we have to take action against people and when not. Somehow, we came down to the topic of religion, although I do not understand why we are talking about the believer's feeling and why not about the feelings of those who do not believe. What kind of equality is this? I do not understand why Christian church or any other church, being a public organization, why does it teach me? Why should they? Who authorized you to do that? I wanted to say another thing. When we're talking about sacrilege, we can understand sacrilege in a broad sense or in a narrow sense. And I believe that it is not by chance that neither the international law nor the national laws contain a definition of sacrilege. Because what we're talking about? We're talking about a limitation of freedom. Every person knows there is freedom and there is a limitation of freedom. I can do this and I cannot do that. And this is sacrilege. So we can use another word. We can use offense. Here in Russia, we understand sacrilege as only something related to religious life, objects, or persons who belong to a certain confession. Although that is not so. And it was already mentioned here. And defining the sacrilege, developing some documents is probably not necessary, because this definition of sacrilege is covered by other definitions that have the right to exist and that do exist for a long time. And as for art, we know that some pieces of art were believed to be pornography. They were prohibited, they could not be exhibited, and all those pieces of art were considered very bad things. But things changed. We are living without a clear legal definition of pornography. And that's also sacrilege. Pornography is sacrilege. Therefore, when we are talking about sacrilege in art, probably this is also something that is passing, that has a tinge of modernity. And what will be considered sacrilege today will not be considered sacrilege tomorrow. Thank you. My name is Dmitry Davidov. I'm an AP of the Department of the Division for Relationship between Church and Society. And I would like to answer you about the sacrilege. In some cases, the very topic, in some sense, the very topic of the roundtable has been falsely defined. The criminal code and the administrative code do not contain so if we are using some political symbols in art, any political part, that can be seen as an offense to that party, for instance. And religion is no exception, because it's one of the ways of looking at the world. I liked the idea of an expert review. Really, religion, in principle, is a holistic thing. It is much wider than state, art, or any other concept. That's why religion explicitly contains the law, for instance, Sharia, or it contains political doctrines which do not need the classical Western political doctrines like the right wing, the left wing, or the centrist. So there is a danger. Revealing the danger of a piece of art, I believe it's necessary to take preventive measures to create groups of experts which will contain critics of art, specialists on religions, on social sciences. And that's not censorship. It's very important. It's not censorship. It's an evaluation by specific experts. And after the exhibition, when suddenly there are civil activists no matter what kind of, they will try to close the exhibition. The claims will be not against a museum. The claims will be against the experts who evaluated the exhibition. Civil activists. I'm not talking about rights and obligations, but I mean what Father Roman mentioned. Sometimes on the illegal level, not on the legal level, not on the juridical level, a person sees a religious offense as a vendetta, and so they write to the prosecutor's office and to other authorities, and they do the right thing. Doesn't matter. The matter is that they don't do something illegal. They act as civilized citizens. And thirdly, about the icons in museums. The matter is that icons are better preserved in museums. I remember my own childhood, and I can see that when I go to a Sunday school, and when that Sunday school takes children to the Tretyakov gallery, they still pray before the icons. They make the signs of the cross. And the fact that the icon is in a museum does not hinder us from seeing it as an icon. No one mentioned the ordinary priest. Now, I would like all of the participants of the discussion to make brief presentations. I will ask 3 provocative questions, very specific. Firstly, a swastika. Must it be prohibited only in Germany or all around the world? Do you believe that the cross on a Russian church or with a crescent underneath offends the feelings of Muslims? Many people see it as a Muslim sign. And thirdly, do we need to introduce a law like in France which punished for negation of the Holocaust of Armenians? Not Jews, Armenians. Those are very acute questions, and we are talking about these things. There are very little places, a few places where we can talk about that, and we created such a place. Now, the Holocaust of Armenians. Must we punish those who say there was no Holocaust of Armenians? And I ask those questions, colleagues, who will start? Mikhail. Well, as for the swastika, that is a Hindu tradition. It exists in Sanskrit, and the new sense that was introduced into this sign in the 30s or in the 20s, I believe that this is my personal opinion, and this is my concept because I'm an Orientalist and I listen to the lectures of our professors. So I see it in the context of the Indian tradition. Although, if you think about it, you can find other explanations to that. As for the crescent underneath the cross, Mikhail already mentioned that it has nothing to do with Islam. For those Muslims who do not know, maybe it seems like a challenge, although this is a tradition which is not anti-Muslim. It's a vessel, it's a ship, it's a symbol of an anchor. As for the Armenian Holocaust, it's a complex problem. Yes, there was a Holocaust of Armenians by the end of the Ottoman Empire, and there is a criminal, Enver Pasha, who was punished. He was killed in 1922. And because I often visit Turkey, and you know that Turkey is experiencing a powerful Islamic renaissance because the head of the state is a Muslim, a pious Muslim. But as far as I know, there is a dialogue established between the government of Armenia and Turkey, and gradually those problems are being removed because, for instance, football matches between Turkish and Armenian teams do happen, and there are signals about forbearance and tolerance. Yes, I understand. Thank you very much. I started with a proverb, and I would continue with that. A person for whom striving towards the Lord is the main thing is ready to sacrifice everything else, including his life. It is apart from the gospel. A person sells everything and buys a piece of land with the treasure. He becomes a pauper, but he obtains the treasure of faith. There are attempts to attract the attention of believers and non-believers to different objectives, to create certain subjects which are controversial. But I believe that the objective of the Russian Orthodox Church and all of the traditional Russian religions is to show the objective that will consolidate everyone. Like during the tumult of the 17th century in Russia, like the church dropped a seed, planted a seedling, and the country came into being. So let's not look for points of discord. Let's try to find things that unite us and be united in that. As for the different symbols, like my colleagues mentions, expertise is needed, and opinion of experts will provide a well-balanced decision. For the rank-and-file people, a swastik is something that is really not very pleasant, but from the point of view of an Orientalist, it's just a symbol that has different meanings. If you look further at the cross, the anchor is the symbol of salvation, a harbor where people are saved from sin. And as for the genocide of Armenian, because my father is Armenian, for me it's a personal tragedy.
The law on negation of Holocaust is a very good legal pattern to address topical issues which are ethical, cultural, which are brewing in the society. In our Parliament and Duma, they introduced a draft law about the Victory Day, that it should be protected. So the Armenians should not be, say, beaten. Fascists should be symbols should be prohibited. Well, many times the colleagues spoke about symbols, and I think that also pertains to a general cultural level, because if every person knows that the swastiks is an Indian symbol of sun, while the so-called crescent on the cross is a symbol of a boat, people would treat differently. I think it is for people of art to enhance the general knowledge of art by the people, and the responsibility of the lords is not to go into domain which is not theirs, that is the domain of the art, but try to focus and limit the attempts to that area which is responsibility of the, say, law regulators. colleagues, we have been in the progress for 2 hours already. I think it's time for us to wind up. And I want to thank everyone for sharing this time, for giving this time to us. And I also want to thank the organizer of this forum, because the subject matter of our roundtable is not a standard subject matter for a legal forum, and due to that, we obviously are not prepared yet to discuss it in the right way. However, I think our roundtable discussion is a testimony of the fact that such issues can be addressed. And I think someone was very right in saying there are some things which unites us. This is the desire to protect cultural heritages. Under no pretext, the cultural monuments should be destroyed. And this, I think, is the common ground, common platform upon which we can stand together. And we should protect this cultural heritage. And that helps everyone to retain a certain level of culture with the people. So this is the kind of education. You cannot educate using laws, but if you simply know from the early childhood that something is not to be done, you won't do that. But any penalty, no matter how, say, painful it can be, will not, say, educate you. Well, and like, for example, it's. And finally, we may take the sample or imitate the, say, attempts, the activities of the New York, say, authorities, the mayor of New York, Bloomberg, who started to clean the coaches of the cars of New York underground train system from graffiti. There has been a number of very interesting points of view aired, and it's important for me to hear here at the legal forum that law is not the panacea from all, because law can be applied in a variety of ways. And there are certain spheres where we should understand that when we do not require the definitions per se, that we need to regulate something. Unfortunately, many of us believe that many things in our life should be regulated. I cannot subscribe to this opinion. That will result in a growing number of prohibitions, which will finally end up in people going through the, say, thickness of those barriers. And I also think that a very important opinion was aired to the fact that small, say, tolerant instances of tolerance in the area of ethics may result in a big, say, transgression of ethical laws. Once again, we can speak only about the ethical rules. We can also now think about the rules of having a discourse, a discussion, without going the violent way. Even laws cannot be the say, final argument. It is the word, spoken word. This is the art, museums, culture, which can educate people. And we would like to see that the dialogue should lead to another dialogue. And then we'll be able to understand that we live in the same world, in one world, and we will define notions in the right way when we have the urge to criticize someone, be it the church, be it the Ministry of Culture, be it the, say, ministers, and there are non-governmental organizations. There are many organizations in our society where people see differently, and we try to figure out the way other people think, and the beauty of the situation is that we're different. We should also think that ban is something which is inherent in culture. It's an eternal dispute. Culture, religion, is it a part of religion? Is the religion part of the culture? Whatever. There are many common tasks that they address. A culture is always deals with bans, but the ban should be such that everyone should accept it as an unavoidable ban. Well, because at the end of the day, law is also a part of culture. This is what I wanted to mention at the conclusion of our roundtable discussion. I want once again to thank you all for the input which you have made. This is one of the very few first attempts in my memory to address seriously things which have may result in social reverberations. But I think we should keep on trying. We should keep on understanding what all these things are all about. And uh, so, once again, speaking about the church attitude, he recalled, Mr. Shvedkoy, that actors were not allowed to be buried on the sacred ground in the church. So there are many things in our life, in our history, we should remember. It's difficult to address everything in a single go. Once again, thank you, and we thank our interpreters for their input.